Good morning and welcome to Afghan Women Speak, Voices from Within and Beyond. I'm one of the co-organizers. My name is Liladhar Pense, and I am here to help throughout the conference. Couple of logistical things that you need to keep in mind, that we have found ourselves in a dynamic situation where some people are still having trouble signing in, especially from overseas location. So I invoke patience from you. This conference, before I start introducing our opening remarks speaker, I would like to remind everybody that many of us in North America work on the different campuses, and these campuses are located on the territories of unceded lands of First Nations or indigenous people of the United States and Canada. And if you would like to know more about what that land acknowledgement means, please go to the conference website and scroll all the way down, and you will see the full text of the land acknowledgement. Having said that, this conference is an effort in which there are many key people who participated in helping me organize, and the credit goes to American Institute of Afghanistan Studies and Mortensen Center for International Library Programs at UIUC, who have generously sponsored this conference. I would especially thank Andy Kokinas, Dipali Mukhopadhyay, and also Dr. Omar Sharifi, along with all our speakers who unanimously agreed to participate in this conference. This conference is dedicated to the women of Afghanistan, and it will provide you and us with a space for Afghan women, scholars, poets, activists, and analysts to share their experiences, insights in the honor of International Women's Day. Having said that, I will now introduce our speaker, Dipali Mukhopadhyay, who will be opening this conference. She is an associate professor in the global policy area at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. Her research focuses on the relationship between political violence, state building, and governance during and after the war. She is currently serving as a senior expert on Afghanistan for the US Institute of Peace. She is the author of Good Rebel Governance, Revolutionary Politics, and Western Intervention in Syria, Cambridge University Press, forthcoming, with Kimberly Harvey, and Warlords, Strongman Governors, and the State in Afghanistan, Cambridge University Press, 2014. Her work has been published in several edited volumes, as well as the British Journal of Political Science, Conflict, Security, and Development, Economics and Politics, Foreign Affairs, International Negotiation, and Perspectives on Politics. It has been also featured in media outlets, including The Economist, Lawfare, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. Dipali, welcome to the conference, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Liladhar, for spearheading this effort. It's been really a privilege to work with you on this. Thank you to Omar Sharifi and Andy Kokinos, as you said, of the American Institute of Afghan Studies, of which I am also part. And most especially, thank you to our extraordinary panelists and to our audience members for joining us today. I will open my remarks today with an awkward confession, which is I don't really like International Women's Day. I appreciate the history of this day as an important one, which is grounded in radical movements that sought to force questions of equity, safety, and change into the center of the public square many decades ago. Those movements, their demands, and the women who championed them did a profound public service, and they changed the conversation the world over as a result. But in the contemporary American imaginary, like many things, we have made this day about us. And by us, I mean privileged American women like myself who proclaim our solidarity with those whose lives we presume to appreciate, even as we fail to take responsibility for the ways in which our governments, militaries, and economic systems have contributed so profoundly to their plight. We imagine, as Laila Abulukho put it, that they need us to save them. And in so doing, we strip them of their agency and their politics, even as we imagine ourselves offering them new emancipatory possibilities in the process. Part of that impulse comes from a natural human wish to feel better, to focus on the suffering of those far away as a means of deflecting attention from our own shortcomings as a society, and a decision not to attend to our wish to dominate others. A kind of international liberal antidote to the domestic illiberalisms that reside uncomfortably close. So many powerful writers, from Laila Abulukho and Mahmoud Mamdani to Nimi Gaurinathan and Nivi Manchanda, have forced us to confront that impulse. That we routinely make the move to say something, to do something, to feel something good in order to avoid saying, doing, and feeling the bad. That, unfortunately, has become so much of how International Women's Day makes itself manifest. Glossy photos of Western women celebrating themselves for shining a light on the misery or the bravery of those in some faraway place whose real lives they will never truly know, and whose truths they need not contend with because the performance of solidarity is enough. In this gathering on this 9th of March, the day after International Women's Day, we are endeavoring to do something different. We strive to leave behind the performative impulses of yesterday and enter into a substantive set of reflections on the part of a group of artists, writers, scholars, and public servants. Afghan women who speak here on behalf of themselves and their own particular perspectives and experiences, and no one else's. They do not represent, quote, Afghan women. They are not symbols or heroes or martyrs. They are students, professionals, activists, and public intellectuals who have shaped and been shaped profoundly by the events of the last 2 decades, when their homeland came into violent, transformative conversation once again with the rest of the world. Some of them will speak to us from Kabul, others from their new homes around the world. I cannot summarize what they will say because the only thing we agreed is that they will each take 15 minutes to reflect for themselves. This is their space to do with as they choose, and we are so grateful to them and so delighted that you have chosen to take this time today to listen and engage with what they have to say. I will close by noting that yesterday on International Women's Day, almost all of the wishes I received for the occasion came from Afghan women. Some inside the country, others displaced over the border, still others making new lives in exile further away. They sent me photographs of flowers and poetic tributes and funny memes, all of which centered joy and gratitude for our sisterhood, with only the faintest echoes of their own tribulations. I have tried in the past 24 hours to make sense of what those wishes meant. An homage to friendship, an acknowledgement of loss, a call to action, maybe also a cruel irony and a beautiful, undeniable truth. That in a place where medieval ideology and modern geopolitics have colluded to banish women from every corner of public life, women are writing, talking, organizing, lamenting, agitating, and celebrating in terms that refuse to submit, in terms that insist and persist, in terms that remind me of what the poet Shafika Khalwak wrote in Adi magazine a few months after the fall of Kabul and the loss of her home. She reflected on the garden of flowers her father had tended, a garden that had survived many chapters of war and from which she was forced to leave in August of 2021. In the coming months, she struggled to write, at a loss for words, but unwilling to release the intention, the ambition to make art. So she wrote a poem for us in Adi about how one day she will write a poem. As Nasima Zirak has written, Khapawak made room in this piece for the kinds of uncertainty, unknowing, and inability to express that come with profound loss and grief, that come with rupture. But those hesitations, even silences, are not to be confused with surrender. Instead, they reside alongside a tenacious insistence that there is more to say, and it will be said on their terms, on her terms. It is in that spirit of tenacious insistence that I will now turn the floor over to Shafika and her colleagues to commence our conversation today. So let me first introduce our speakers for this first conversation and let you know that we are waiting on one of them who will hopefully join us from Australia, but I will make the introductions now and pass the microphone first to Shafika. So Shafika Khapawak is a poet, a writer, a columnist, and a translator. She is a graduate of the American University of Afghanistan with a degree in political science and public administration. She is the director of the Musawar Foundation, which works on children's literature, education, and rights advocacy. She is the author of 6 books, many articles and essays and poems, including the one I referenced. And she is currently a visiting scholar at Wellesley College, Massachusetts. Let me next introduce to you Humaira Rahbin. Humaira is an analyst at the Center for Information Resilience in London and a New America Afghanistan Observatory Fellow. She worked mainly for women's empowerment with civil society organizations, the US Agency for International Development, and the Dutch diplomatic mission in Afghanistan. She has written for many media outlets, including The Intercept and the London School of Economics Human Rights blog. Rahbin holds an MPhil degree in public policy from the University of Cambridge. She is a Cambridge Trust Scholar and an alumna of the Lucy Cavendish College. She is also a member of the Chatham House's Common Future Conversations platform. And finally, Azadeh Raz Mohammed is a PhD candidate at the Melbourne Law School in Australia. Her doctoral research investigates the cases for the inclusion of a, quote, international crime of terrorism, unquote, in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. She holds an LLM from the University of Essex and a second LLM as a Fulbright Scholar from Ohio State University. In September 2021, Azadeh co-founded the Hamdallah campaign, assisting vulnerable Afghans at the risk of persecution and advocating accountability for victims of atrocity crimes in Afghanistan. In addition to this work, she has worked at the Administrative Office of the President of Afghanistan and served as an adjunct lecturer of law at the American University of Afghanistan. Shafika, I will first turn the floor to you for the next 15 minutes, and we will continue from
there. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Dipali Jane, Ustad, and salam to everyone who is watching as an audience and my fellow panelists. Dipali, you almost made me cry. I was yesterday here at one of the high level event of the Forbes magazine, and I was in a panel, but before that I sit as an audience and to listen to some of the panels that was going on. And when I started listening, I was about to cry in the room because you see the difference, what is going on in Afghanistan and with the women and the girls inside the country, and you see other part of the world, and it was happening in an Islamic country in Abu Dhabi, and then and then you look at that, and everything is like, you just don't want to believe in the unfairness and the injustice of the world. And then you think of that these are the people somehow, if not directly, and sometimes directly responsible for what is going on in Afghanistan, especially for women inside the country. It is, when I came to West, it is very difficult for me to understand to communicate with people here, because sometimes I even cannot convey my message when I speak to them, like, the girls in my country are not allowed to go to school. They're like, what? Can this be happening? But unaware of that, these governments and their policies led to that, what is happening in Afghanistan. So it is, as a woman who came from Afghanistan, who lived her whole life in that country, it's very difficult for me to understand the I don't know, even the women of the Western countries, and how they are. It has always been said that women leadership is different, but do we see it? Is it different? Like, I was expecting at least two categories, that they will respond to the situation of Afghan women differently and more pragmatically and more bold, and it was first with the Islamic countries, and they did not responded as they should have been, and the women leaders across the world, the feminist movements across the world. And then you think, like, how these civil society that they claim, the women leaders that they think are different, how they are at the same time swirling in this circle of their government policies of, as you mentioned, the liberalism, and they're on how to say that in this body, they are just a part of it, but probably a different part of it. So they cannot go beyond that. Doesn't matter how much they claim, doesn't matter how many days they are naming after that. And I think this is very critical for this, for people to understand this and question that. If it comes to something inside that country, that they will be personally hit by it, they will go beyond any law, they will go beyond any boundary to challenge that. But if it coming to someone who is living a few miles, they won't be touched by it. So how is that different than the leadership that has been led throughout the history by men, as we see? How can we say then the world has changed for women? If you are a woman who lives in Afghanistan, it is not changed for you. The world is the same as it was 200 years ago, 300 years ago, or 2000 years ago, probably better. Probably life was better for women in Afghanistan 200 to 300 years ago than it is today. And I, as hopeful as I was when I was growing up, looking at all these women across the world, that they were getting into high positions and in all these getting the resources, whether it's economic or political or social, and influencing the policies, I see that their leadership is not as different as the men leadership. I have realized that now. And if it is different, then it is time for them to show it. For Afghan women, I think sometimes I don't want to say myself a victim, because we are survivors. I hate being sympathized with. I hate being looked at someone who is weak, who needs to be saved, who needs to be, I don't know, these things. But at the same time, if I don't talk about this, it is kind of relieving others from the things that they did to us. We are victims, but not in a way that we are weak, but in a way that we are victims of the policies of the powerful. Whether it was our government or probably the superpower or the Taliban right now, we are the victims of the policies. And I think that in the history of Afghanistan, I was speaking with Ustad Sharifi the other day, the way women, the presence of women is very, very, I think it is very peculiar. It is very unique. most of the great events that happened in the history of Afghanistan was somehow women were involved around that events. The war against the British, when that was said that because they are marrying our women or because they are looking in a immoral way to our women, that is why we should fight against them. Then the overthrow of Amir Amanullah Khan, women had very center part in that because he was bringing all these change in the lives of women and the society was against that. Though there were other things like the taxation and a lot of other things, but the way people were gathered were around the topic of women. And the same thing with the communists, the same thing with the Mujahideen. And when the United States invading Afghanistan, they were using the slogan that we are saving Afghan women. Again, it is women. And even today, if we see nobody's talking about anything else but women, and if the Afghan women issue is solved, then nobody has a problem with it seems like nobody has a problem with the Taliban. So how we are played in all these politics, we are in the center, but at the same time, women do not have voice. They are deciding for us. And even today, as an Afghan woman, I think we do not have our voice. Our agency is taken from us. And today it is taken not only by men, but sometimes by, I would say, by foreign women, that they sometimes speaking probably on behalf of us or talking somewhere in the key events, in the key rooms that the key decisions are made. Afghan women are not invited, but instead some woman from another country or another place is there deciding for an Afghan woman. So throughout this even history and all these years, the presence of women was always there. We played in all the key events, but at the same time, we did not have our own agency. It was taken from us, and it is still happening. We cannot, I don't know how to say this, but in a way we are kind of, I feel like colonized by men, colonized by Western activists, and it's very difficult to get out of all these definitions and define our own path. Every country, every society has its own paths, its own, I don't know, its own definition and situation, and it's particular to that society. And as Afghan women, I think we are lost to find that. If you look at it today, a few days ago, the Australian cricket team declined a play with the Afghan cricket team. And then we, in the protest of what is going on against women in Afghanistan, and everyone was angry some were angry at the Afghan cricket team that they didn't like this, and some were happy because the Australian cricket team shows solidarity with Afghan women. And a few of us, a few of the girls, we came up and we said, like, we are going to pressure the Afghan cricket team to stand up with Afghan women and raise their voice. And in that time that we were thinking of writing something or tweeting something, suddenly this whole event went from Afghan women to an ethnic discussion that what is going on in the country, and the cricket team is all Pashtuns and things like that. And women were lost in this whole discussion. There were no women. Nobody was then talking about women. This is how we are. And we don't realize this as a woman, that even see, we are completely erased from public space. We are nobody. We are faceless, voiceless creatures in that country. Even at that time, it will not be important to talk about us, but it will be important for them to talk about their own politics and power and prejudices and whatever it is. So even in that time, as a woman, we probably, it was raised because of women, but then women were lost and it went to something totally else. This is how it is, and it is very, very complicated. It is very, very complicated to understand it. And with all that, I just want to say that it is time for us to realize our power. If a government can be overthrown because of a woman in the history, or even now, just imagine how powerful we are. Just to recognize that, to recognize this strength. If we can play with the and organize, and they can be organized against our names. Just imagine if we do that ourselves and find it by ourselves, find our own agency, find our own way to move forward. I think we will shake the world. We will shake the world, and we definitely can do that. Not led by men, not defined by men, not said by men, but by ourselves. And it is time for us to come together, despite all the differences that we have, and stand up beside each other. First, we have to secure our rights as a woman, then we will discuss later on who is where and who should be where and not. So I will close by that. Thank you.
Thank you, Shafiqa Jan. We will shake the world. I'm gonna ask Humaira if you're ready to speak with next 15 minutes for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this event, Dr. Leela Dar, Dr. Sharifi, Deepali John, and all the partner organizations. And thank you so much for having me here. It's such a pleasure to be here. And excuse me for my bad voice. I've been suffering from a very bad cold recently. It's been a week that it's not leaving me. I'm glad to be here, and just wanted to make something clear that I am representing, today I'm here, I'm talking, and the opinions I share are my own, and they do not reflect the opinions and views of the organizations I work for or have affiliations with. It's just purely my own views and opinions. And I think for me, it's such a pleasure to be in such a gathering, especially that I'm like speaking from same room where amazing women, some of the women who have initiated and led the only force of civil resistance against the Taliban in Afghanistan, like Noira Jan, Sana Jan, and other amazing women that I've been following their works and have been also in touch with a number of them, but I kind of cannot, I mean, words are not enough to admire their bravery and the work that they have been doing. So it's really great honor. I think I would like to I would like to first start with a short overview of our recent past. I don't want to really cling to the past a lot, because I know we have to look at the past, learn from it, but have to kind of move on. And the second part would be first as an overview, and the second part would be about excuse me for the voice coming. And the second part would be about what went wrong, and what should have been, what could have been done, and how those things kind of continue to happen even today. And we somehow don't learn lessons from it, and it's kind of blocking our way to go forward when it comes to women's situation in Afghanistan. I think we all know that after 2001, when the Taliban government was toppled down by the international community led by the US, that was an era of change. We have to admit that, an era of change and positive change for Afghan women, given that we spent years first in the civil war that had like its impacts on our lives more than anybody else. And then the Taliban, who established a gender appetite in the country and a kind of confined women inside their homes, the thing that they are doing today, but today they kind of have learned to kind of justify it or have like voices outside the country to kind of whitewash it and kind of bring reasons to it. And I think that era was like an era of positive change. I kind of divide the decades into 2 decades of change. First, I think, was a decade of sowing, a decade of bringing changes, and the next decade was a decade of like reaping the what we sowed. The first decade, I mean, the most of the people, women here in the call, we come from a generation where we spent our childhood and utter poverty and displacement. I kind of spent my early childhood as a refugee kid in Pakistan, and after 2011 we came back to Afghanistan, and we kind of benefited from the changes that happened in the country. But in terms of when we talk about benefiting, I want to also reiterate that we were not just a mere just the receivers of the benefits. Actually, we had a role there. We were actors, and we sacrificed a lot to be standing where we stand today. And I'm sure we all have our personal stories, how we fought for each of our right, even that there weren't any Taliban, but the mindsets, the mentalities, the culture that kind of was still there, and each of us had to fight for our rights still. So I think in that case, I want to again emphasize that when we talk about how women benefited from the change and the freedom and the privileges that were at the time, it was not just women receiving, but women playing roles, working hard and achieving and on their own. And I think that era was like an era of like we saw women going to schools, universities, going abroad, getting scholarships, and kind of equipping themselves with the knowledge, with the qualifications, to kind of contribute and Afghanistan's future. And the second decade was a decade that unfortunately ended very sadly, was a decade that we started to reap what we worked for. Like women and men those who went abroad, they came back to country. Many women graduated from universities, they joined the civil service and other organizations, and they were kind of playing a role and to change the Afghanistan, play a role into the future of Afghanistan, and kind of play a role and also be a part of the positive change. And again, for at that time, again, we kind of had a generation of Afghan women and men that were committed to staying in Afghanistan, working for Afghanistan and building its future, despite all the challenges, despite all the threats, because it wasn't easy at that time as well. They were like on a daily basis, we faced threats, bombings, and suicide bombings and killings. But despite all that, we were hopeful that we hold the future, and this future is ours. This was like a kind of a very positive picture of, I tried to portray of the past 20 years of what happened. And but at the same time, I understand that being complacent and kind of ignoring the gaps is something that we shouldn't be doing, because if we do it, and I think we have been doing it to a certain level, and that's why we are here today. And the whole country has fallen to the Taliban. And I think we kind of have to sometimes look back and see what went wrong and learn the lessons and move on. But what we are doing at the current situation is like we're not learning. And by we, when I say, I think there are many actors that we can kind of talk about who did what. The former Afghan government, international community, civil society, people, everybody. But I think the former Afghan government doesn't exist anymore. And the international community led by the US were the ones who dealt with the Taliban, who did Doha Agreement, who brought the Taliban again to the country. And I think that's why I'm kind of going to focus on what the international community did wrong, and also interestingly how today as well they're continuing to do the same when it comes to women's issues. And I also understand that I cannot really go into each actor's wrongdoings or right doings and analyze them because I don't have that time, and I might not also be that person to talk about. But I kind of look from an international development point of view because I worked in that sector for some time, especially on women's issues in Afghanistan. One of the things that I was there at that time from the beginning of the international intervention in Afghanistan, and still is, and I think it is how Western countries, international community, they women's issues and women's rights, their needs, their aspirations. I think when it comes to policies, whether they're national policies or foreign policy, you kind of understand that the women's issues are still at the periphery. It's not at the center. It's not the goal. It's the tool. And when they needed to, when they need to kind of bring it, and they needed to kind of show things nice, they bring it, but make it show it's at the center, but overall it's not. And with the intervention in Afghanistan, I think over the years, it's been like, okay, first it was like, let's save Afghan women. But today, you can see, and when the peace negotiations were happening with the Taliban, again, Afghan women went back to periphery. It was like sideline. No, let's prioritize peace first. Let's have peace, then it will solve women's issues. And I should see at that time, I was closely working with women activists, with civil society groups, and they were continuously sharing their concerns that how you are making the peace and not including women's concerns, it's not going to work. And we have seen it's not working. It's failed. And saying that, I think even today, it's like that. We're not, the international community somehow has not learned it, and I think that's why we kind of, more countries need to establish and adhere to a feminist foreign policy, because it brings not just women but minorities, other people at the center of foreign policy, and it's going to work for and it's fruitful, not just for women, but the international family, for the international community as well. So I think saying that, and what happened in Afghanistan in the past 20 years was the fact that women's issues were like, okay, so we are doing like national security, sovereignty, and these elements matter, but when it comes to women, okay, so women's matters are like a separate department. It's not part of the main elements of change or policies, and that happened. And as I mentioned, when the peace negotiations with the Taliban were happening, it was like, and today now with the humanitarian crisis, like it's always said, people are hungry, let's prioritize humanitarian situation in the country, while we understand it's how disastrous it is, how important it is. but I sometimes wonder how for how many years the international community will feed people with humanitarian aid while keeping half of the society not learning, not working, and not contributing to the economy of their families and the society in Afghanistan. And you kind of see it's not a strategic point of view that they're taking, and they're not including, and they're not seeing women a part of like the big their priorities. They kind of have a hierarchy of priorities, and they say, okay, wait for peace, then wait for this and that, then we'll then women's issues. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. The second thing, again, it happened before and it's happening again today, is that it's a matter of how we look into women's issues, and particularly when it comes to Afghan women, is we think that Afghan women just, when we talk about Afghan women, we think like, okay, so there should be 1-2 person representing and being the Afghan women. While when it comes to men, I think we never say this is the face of an Afghan man, because we understand men, when we talk about men, they come from different backgrounds, ideologies, beliefs, and they have their different voices. The same should have been about women. I mean, they're not one to Afghan, and it's possibly happening also because women, when it comes to opportunities and resources, have less access to opportunities and resources. If it's a conference happens, they kind of give 2 or 1 or 2 or 1 places at the table for Afghan women. And I think we have to kind of understand that women in Afghanistan are as diverse as the men in the country or other groups. There are women from different ethnicities, beliefs, backgrounds, political ideologies, and so many other factors that we kind of have been they have been ignored. And then in terms of representation, they just bring 1 or 2 and they say, okay, this is Afghan women, and this is how an Afghan woman, for example, should look, or things like that. So we not letting so many other voices in to talk for themselves. We may not like them, we may not agree with them, but they exist and they should be here. So, and that kind of approach has been there, and that's why all the progress that was made was kind of concentrated on big cities, and it did not really went and in other parts of Afghanistan. It could not spread because of like, okay, this is Afghan women and she's like doing good, so it's okay. While other women living in other parts of the country could not have access, could not have a voice, unfortunately, and even not an access to some of the very fundamental rights like access to education. And I think today again the same thing is happening when it comes to dealing with the Taliban. And about the future of Afghanistan, they kind of when it comes to talking to Afghan women, they think, okay, who we should listen to. But I always say the simplest thing that they can do as those who have leverages to pressurize the Taliban, who are like sending money to the Taliban and who have dealt with the Taliban, is like the simplest thing you can do is like just listen to Afghan women, what they say. By listening, I don't mean like hearing, but actually listening, actually understanding, and actually changing those into policy actions and bringing a change and a change from women's perspective. And I think that's the simplest thing, that when it comes to like, okay, so how we should go forward is like this. I mean, when Afghan women talk about Taliban's gender appetite, how it should be dealt with, I think there are we are the and other challenges, I think there are voices and they should be heard. Yeah, I think I just took a lot more longer than I should have. Were my points. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Humaira Jan. Perfect amount of time. Very meaningful comments. Thank you. Let me now pass the microphone to Azadeh Raz Muhammad. If you can unmute yourself. Welcome, Azadeh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dipali. Thank you very much, Dr. Sharifi. Thank you very much, Dr. Liladar, for the opportunity for speaking today among some of the most amazing Afghan women and also my friends and colleagues. It's a pleasure to be here and speaking with you all. I just wanted to say apologizes for being a little bit late this morning today, because it's 4 a.m. in Australia, and I have a little daughter that sometimes needs me at the various times. Yeah, I just wanted to start with Humaira Jan's last point about the gender apartheid happening right now in Afghanistan. As you see, there's a lot of comments right now, and also yesterday there was an announcement of a coalition formed between the women in Iran and Afghanistan to call for international assistance and advocacy to recognize and interpret the current ongoing gender apartheid in Iran and Afghanistan. We all know that apartheid is actually mostly the crime of apartheid. Apartheid is actually mostly about racial discrimination. And when we think about the apartheid, we suddenly or automatically go to South Africa and only talk about racial aspects of this crime because it has not been extended to gender. But there's always has been a discussion that it should also extend to gender. And I'm really glad that such a coalition has been formed, and I really hope that it gains some momentum and attention, especially right now that there's a discussion of discussing the Treaty of Crimes Against Humanity at the United Nations 6th Committee of General Assembly, and I hope that it will be expanded further and also be included at the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. There was actually discussion about this previously as well after the Bosnian and also International Criminal Tribunal on the former Yugoslavia to include rape and gender persecution as an international crime. But it never happened. It never got to that point. It also included rape, but not gender persecution. So I hope that this will be a momentum, a time for all of us to push for a persecution and accountability for gender discrimination and also gender persecution. I think Humaira Jan and Shafiqa Jan spoke so well that I feel like I just wanted to complement some of the points that they have been speaking about. So I'll go a little bit on the history of Afghanistan's women's fights and challenges, and talking about a little bit about the peace process that we had in 2021, and also women's access to healthcare and also access to justice under the Taliban's rule, and what's happening right now a little bit. So we're looking back at the history of women's rights and the status of women in Afghanistan from the law policies of the government. The challenges go as far as the 1990s when Afghanistan was formed as a country. So Afghanistan as a monarchy then had a very progressive king, and we had, for the first time in the country, very new country, we had women's access to education. We had first schools for women. Women had right to say no to forced marriages. The age of marriage was suddenly increased to 16, if I'm not wrong currently. So, but there was a lot of retaliation, a lot of protest against that, and resulted in the overthrowing of the monarchy as well. A lot of people now attribute that Amanullah Khan's, and that there are a lot of people who started to protest Amanullah Khan's progressive policies and also strategies in the country was because of his view on women's rights. So no matter who ruled Afghanistan ever since, women's status and rule and legal studies in the country has always been contested and always been a subject of protest. Even if it was a more conservative regime, it was a more progressive regime or a communist regime, it was always at the forefront of fight, always a controversy and always a fight. And who suffered? The women of Afghanistan. For example, during the communist regime or the governments who were supported by the USSR, there was also relatively a lot of new policies and rules were introduced for women. For women, for example, the dress code and attire was more free, but again, there was a lot of backlash from the more conservative part of the society, attacking women's rights activists, attacking women students, like subjugating them to a lot of derogatory terms on the streets because of their way of their clothing and everything. So no matter how the law had protected their rights, still, and there was a lot of backlashes from the society and conservative part of society. Coming back to the Doha Agreement, as Humaira John was mentioning, and also the peace negotiation with the Taliban. That's another form that I think outside of this scope of today's webinar, that how politicized it was. But women's representation has always been nominal. I think Humaira John spoke about what we can learn. I think yesterday I was in a panel and another panel here in Melbourne that a colleague of us from formerly working with one of the donor agencies working for women in Afghanistan, she was saying that her colleagues were working on some policies in the office for women's for their female colleagues attendance to workplace and everything, and also protecting the rights and status at workplace, how to make it convenient and more the environment more friendly for them. But she was not involved. All her female colleagues were not involved. So it was just a few of their male colleagues sitting together, writing a policy affecting her studies in the office, but she was not involved. How critical was the peace negotiation in Doha with the Taliban, that we knew what Taliban's policy and ideology were on women's rights in the past 20 years, attacking schools, attacking hospitals, maternity hospitals, attacking all these women's, abducting them, enforced disappearance of women. And also the 90s oppressive measures on women, banning them from education, right to work. How concerned all of us were when the negotiations started. But how many women were on the table? There was only three women on the table negotiating peace deal with the Taliban. How could that happen? The international community was present there. The European Union were present there. The United States and Australia, all the international community had a presence there, had a say there. But did anyone ever object to that? That why there's only three women on the table with us today, negotiating peace with the Taliban? Whenever we protested that why there's only three women on the table, they said that you're against peace in Afghanistan, you don't understand, Taliban has reformed, this is Taliban number 2, Taliban would never reverse the past 20 years achievements, no matter how slow or how minor it was. They will never reverse the rights back to what we had in the 90s. This is Taliban, change Taliban. Oh, you don't understand, this is, we have negotiated with them, we understand better. Afghan women, you're wrong, yet again, and that's the three women, although how strong they are, and how capable they are in their own individual terms. But they said that, no, this is a changed Taliban. They will not reverse what happened in the 90s. But right now, like 18 minutes, 19 months after the Taliban coming in power, we know that Taliban has reversed every single law and oppressive measures that they had on women again. Like the same as 90s. The only difference this time is like probably a little bit, as Humaira John said, that this time women from inside Afghanistan has a little bit voice that can tell us in the outside what's happening. And we have platforms to speak and across the world and see and share what is happening, share our stories, share our concern of what is happening inside the country, which was not possible or available in the 1990s, end of 90s when Taliban was there. There was a recent report saying that women's access to justice under Taliban and women's access to healthcare. Recently, Taliban has banned women from the right to education in university. Even secondary schools are currently banned. How devastating is that? We are the only country in the world that women are fighting for their basic rights, right to go to just for the park for a walk. I'm sure you all here know about how the measures and the decrees of the Taliban Amir has been on women in the past few months, especially in December, that we had one after another banning women from education, banning women from going to park, public bath, which is not accessible to a lot of houses in Afghanistan due to poverty. What should those women do? And also access to contraceptive pills, how crucial and how important that is for women's health. While Afghanistan has been always at the center of, at the forefront of being the worst country in the world for being a mother for childbirth, how difficult that will be for women in Afghanistan going forward. Yesterday, also in the panel, one of the fantastic speakers from Afghanistan was saying that she finished her education and schooling in the past 20 years of Afghanistan's post-Taliban. If we don't reverse and if the international pressure retention leaves Afghanistan right now, that is already slowly leaving, there will not be another woman in the next 20 years or the next 10 years to sit in a panel and speak about her rights and have a qualification in education. She's absolutely right, and that's terrifying to know that in the next few years we will not have women professionals anymore coming from Afghanistan. Women doctors, women engineers. Taliban has banned women a lot of subjects in the recent Concord exams, that women cannot be a lawyer, women cannot be an engineer, women cannot be this and that. They are deciding for us what can we be. So they are completely erasing women, a completely erased women from the Afghan society. All of the decrees of the Taliban's Amir, if you look at them, how many of them are on women? More than 30 of them have been on women's status in the country. Why women are so important and that they actually want to advance the rules and the government on the status of women in the country. They are banning women from right to work. Through the Hamdali campaign that I'm a co-founder, we're in touch with a lot of women head of household who used to work previously with the international organizations or the government agencies. Right now, they have no ways to provide for the family. Being the only or the adult woman in the family, they cannot even leave their home without a male, without any concern of being harassed on the street by the Taliban, being arrested by the Taliban because they don't have a male mahram. They have lost their father and their husband in the conflict. What should those women do? Starve to death? Because there's no policy for the Taliban also to provide for them, assist them with their daily life. Afghanistan is one of the poorest countries, and recently we're going through the worst economic and humanitarian crisis. There's no employment, there's no opportunity to work and provide for these women. What should these women do? And also, let's not forget that even before the Taliban take over, Afghanistan was Afghan women were suffering from domestic violence. They have no access to justice right now. Taliban has erased every written law in the country. And the unwritten law of the Taliban is very concerning of how they will actually protect women's rights, which they don't. All the decrees have been on banning women's rights. Dr. Dipali, I'm not sure if I have enough time to continue or, okay, thank you.
Go ahead and take another few minutes, Azadeh.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor. Yes, so I just wanted to also mention that what can be done from the international community, what can be our demand for the international community is that please stand with us, please provide us more meaningful participation about our status, about our discussions that's happening on Afghanistan. Please don't normalize what is happening in Afghanistan. Please, that's not how it should be normalized, that it's Afghanistan, it's about that now the Taliban is in control. We have been discussing with them, but we didn't have access to them, so that thing is happening, and just give up. Please do not recognize these oppressive strategies and policies on Taliban as normal, as a norm for Afghan women, because that's not a normal policy, and that's not a. We are the only country that women's status is completely erased from public participation. That's not Islamic principle. That's not based on Islam. We all know that. We know that that's ideology that's coming from Taliban, and that has nothing to do with our culture, that has nothing to do with our Islam and religion as we believe. So yes, so do not recognize Taliban's oppressive regimes. The other thing is very concerning when we talk about Afghanistan's women's situation in Afghanistan, and also the international attention, is that the only time that the Afghanistan's women's situation got a lot of attention from the international community was when they were banned from working in NGOs. But before that, also, they were not allowed to go to schools. Why there was not a common stance against that? And one more thing that's very troubling for me personally, and for all of us, I'm sure, in this room, is that it's now almost going to be 2 years that Taliban are in power or control in Afghanistan. Why there's no call for any election in the country? The United Nations, the international community, they're all shying away and calling Taliban the de facto rulers. Why we have to be governed by a de facto rulers? Why the country is going through one of the most acute humanitarian crisis in the history? Why do we have to be governed by de facto rulers? Why they are not calling for an election? Why they're not supporting our voices to say that we need an election in Afghanistan to see if people are supporting Taliban, or if we need a more democratic government to stand with us, who will recognize women's rights. Right now, women is a subordinate or a second citizen to men. We are subordinate to them. We're codependent to them, and how much that will increase the violence against women. Because if they are economically dispowered, they cannot go outside without a male relative. A taxi driver can actually decide if they can actually give you a ride for a few kilometers that a woman is allowed to travel right now in Afghanistan. How devastating is that? Afghanistan has always been, the schools in Afghanistan has always been observing the Islamic principles when they say that we are trying to make the policies more adjustable for the Afghan women and the environment, so they be able to attend universities and schools. But we always had segregated schools. There was no co-education in Afghanistan for especially high schools. So these are all the ideology of Taliban, and this has nothing to do with the Afghan culture. And I feel very devastated to see that we are the only country in the world that women are fighting for their basic right, as basic as going outside for a walk. Forget about education and right to work and right to health and access to justice. Thank you so much, Dr. Zipali.
Thank you so much, Azadeh, for those very powerful remarks and for this really extraordinary set of comments that have gotten us started. So very grateful. I'm going to pass the microphone back to Leeladhar to keep us moving, and just with heartfelt thanks to all of you again for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Deepali. All these presentations so far have moved me, and I'm extremely grateful. We should, however, stick to the time, and I would like to introduce Dr. Omar Sharifi, who is a research fellow at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. In addition, he is an assistant professor at the American University of Afghanistan, senior research fellow and Kabul director of the American Institute of Afghanistan Studies, Asia Society fellow, and a member of Afghan 21 Young Leaders Forum. Sharifi graduated from Kabul Medical Institute in 2003. Following his medical studies, he worked as head of research and publications for the Foundation for Culture and Civil Society in Kabul, and as director of the Open Media Fund for Afghanistan. From 2006 to 2008, he studied cultural anthropology at Columbia University in New York under a Fulbright fellowship. He completed his PhD in anthropology from Boston University in 2019, and he recently joined the New School University Scholars in Exile Consortium. And I'm very grateful to Dr. Omar Sharifi for helping and inspiring us to organize this conference, and he will be moderating the second panel. Dr. Sharifi, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Leeladhar. Thank you for helping actually putting this discussion together. And it's my privilege actually to introduce the second panel. And the second panel is about the present and what's going on in Afghanistan at present. I think the previous speakers somehow touched the topic. They talked about the darkness, the curtain of darkness and silence that's now over Afghanistan, the inhumane gender apartheid policies of Taliban, which itself is a historical phenomenon and which is unprecedented in our history, in Afghanistan history, but also the present, when I'm thinking about the present and I'm trying to understand how to put what's going on in the country vis-a-vis the women, and specifically for the whole citizens of Afghanistan, but especially for women. But when I look at the present and seeing the oppression, seeing the gender apartheid, seeing the brutality of the Taliban, but also I see something that was a couple of years ago, at least during the first Taliban period, was absolutely unbelievable. I see women on the streets. I see women on the forums, I see women internationally and nationally getting together, talking and asking for their rights. I see that despite enormous pressure, intimidation, rape, torture, and imprisonment, the women are still there and their voices up. 25 years ago, I remember when the first Taliban policy, when the Taliban representative were kind of negotiating with the American, the UN, the Taliban, and that time the Pakistani supporters of the Taliban, Pakistan ambassador actually was talking, justifying the Taliban's policy of women as something as part of the Afghan culture. But today that is not possible. And that time we had no voice, but today we have a voice and we talk about it. And also the presence of the women today, when I see them active, despite enormous problems, actually also shows that all these sort of talks about that, the achievements of the last 20 years, the progress that Afghans made, the pains that we have suffered at the same time, the whole idea of the women's rights, the whole idea of the constitutionalism, the whole idea of equality, gender equality, is not something that is actually imported simply because of the international presence. It was the Afghan women organized themselves, not because they were the achievements of the international community, but because the reality of life in Afghanistan. And I see them working, I see them talking, I see them struggling, I see them protesting. And these are the things that actually, at the end of the day, convinced me and gave me the hope that Taliban, as ahistorical they are, will remain irrelevant and ahistorical in managing Afghanistan. And while the Taliban using women's bodies, women's presence, as somehow to justify themselves, but also they are terrified of women. They are terrified of the women's struggle. They're terrified of the women's voices across the world. And I know, despite that Afghanistan right now is on the margins of the international debate, but the struggle of the women will actually bring it back into the center stage, and I have no doubt about it. The 8th of March, which the Paulo talked about it as something that is very weird, but at least for me, when I look at that, when I see that another opportunity that we all get together and raise what matters about the women's rights and women's plight in Afghanistan. I think women's struggle is not just simply for women's rights in Afghanistan currently, it's also about the human rights in Afghanistan for everybody. And with that small sort of introduction, I am going to move ahead to introduce our panelists, who are, I think, coming also from Afghanistan and also around the world. The first one is Anaira Kohistani. Ms. Kohistani has been a civil society and women's rights activist for almost over a decade right now. And since the fall of Kabul, she has been a teacher and civil rights activist and constantly been in the center and the face of women's protest in Afghanistan. And one of the emails that she wrote on the December 21st of 2022, she said that when the Taliban took over my country, we started our demonstrations on the streets of Kabul, Mazar, Herat, Kapisa, in order to prove that the Taliban rule, to protest the Taliban, what they call the Taliban order and Taliban peace and Taliban policies. She experienced a lot of threats in Taliban prison, but actually she continued to remain steadfast in her commitment for freedom of Afghanistan and freedom and human rights in Afghanistan. And our second panelist is Ms. Sana Kohistani. Ms. Kohistani was a 5th-year student at Kabul Medical University. And she came from a province in the north of the country, Kapisa, the smallest province, but has been a volunteer in cultural and education centers on empowering the women for all this period. And our third and last panelist, Ms. Monisa Mabores, worked with national and international organizations for the last decade. She has participated in several activism for the past 15 years, and her last position before the fall of Kabul was a director of M&E education in the Ministry of Finance in Afghanistan. She has participated as a political analyst for over 10 years in media, been an active voice in the media. I personally remember that. And after Taliban took over Afghanistan and occupied the country, she founded the women's main protest movement. And until today, she continues to be an active voice in advocating for equal rights for women in Afghanistan. So without further ado, I will ask our first panelists for the second panel, Khanem Noira Kohistani. The panel is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the organizer of this conference, and thank you for giving time to me. And unfortunately, I can't turn on my camera because I had some problem. As you mentioned, I am one of the Afghan women protest against Taliban rule in Afghanistan. When the Taliban took over my country last August and returned to the power for the second time, I was feared that we were going back on time. And I was afraid of the Taliban closing schools for girls, preventing women from working, and stoning women in public. Some of my worst fears have since come to pass. So I started protest against the Taliban, and I faced the darkness of the Taliban. As you know, I have the experience of going on Taliban prison, and I know everything about the detention, and all my family. I have we were there with my I was there with my 30 years old daughter, 7 years old son, and my husband, and other 41 protesters that we were in a home, and they arrested us from that place. So when I was there, when I entered on the Taliban prison, I was thinking about it. Everything is finished, and I will not go out from there, and they will kill me. They will kill my daughter. They will kill my my son. And I was thinking about what will happen with them on there. And I will never forget crying of my children. I will never forget crying of my fellow protesters and days that we had passed on there. You know, when the Taliban came to power for the second time, they put us in a tragedy, in a real tragedy that never I think about before. But unfortunately, in one night, we lost everything. We lost everything, and Taliban took everything from women of Afghanistan. And that was a situation that we think that we are invisible because they have taken our faces, our hires, our voices, our eyes, our jobs, our breath, our education, and our freedom. So that was very difficult to stand against them and to fight again with them, because we were with our bare hands, and they had everything. They had guns, tongues, and everything. And so we went on the streets, and when I get out of the prison, after giving them a guarantee by my father, my brother, and one of my husband relatives, after that I start again. When I I think that was about 1 week after my releasing, that I start again, and I did an interview with Independence for C. And after that, my family said me, especially my father, that I am going crazy, and it's end. You must go from there, and I want you to be alive because you are you are a mother and you have children. You must be alive. And he said me that perhaps uh, about your daughter, that anything happened with your daughter on that time, what will you do? This is our and your last choice. You don't have any other choice, so you must go from this country. After that, I left the country and I entered to Pakistan alone with my son, and I left behind my 3 years old daughter. And I had passed many bad days in here in Pakistan without my daughter. And when my daughter became sick because of me on that time, my friends helped me to get out my daughter from the border. So I passed lots of difficulties in these 19 months with under the Taliban regime. And my big fear is the situation that it is about the Afghan women and Afghan girls. It's about banning schools. It's about banning universities. It's about banning jobs to the women. You know, it's for about 529 days that students have not sat on their classrooms. Most of them talk with me, they cry to me, and they said me about their hopes that they lose them. Some of them even think about ending of their lives. You know, I was a teacher. As a former teacher, I want to tell you that during the past 20 years, my students would risk their lives to get to the class. Living in Afghanistan was like living on a landmine because of the Taliban's suicide bombing. But my students had a dream, and they want to take part for rebuilding of their countries. So they passed everything. They passed Taliban attacks. They passed patriarchy society in Afghanistan, and they continue their learning. But today I want to share you about the pain of being away from a school, being angry for the result of losing job as a woman. We will not let the world forget about Afghanistan, forget about women of Afghanistan, forget about the daughters of Afghanistan, forget about the universities of Afghanistan. You know, last day, as a woman of Afghanistan, I start my day with 2 tragedy news that happened in Afghanistan. One was happening in Saripul, that you all see it on the social media, and another was happened at on Ghor. One of the protesters that she was a daughter and she stand alone and raised her voice for the right of the education, and the Taliban arrest her with her father. I cried too much when I see the video of the mother that she was crying for her 12 years daughter and 14 years old daughter, and asking for the help and sharing their story, the pain, their pain. On that time, I start crying. You know, in these days, I'm thinking that all of our struggle is going to end for nothing, because we tried too much. We had did our best. It is 18 months that we are busy on this struggle. We are putting our lives in danger. But there is no result from the world. And the world is, they are going to ignoring us as a woman, as a human in the society. So I wish the world must know that in my country, it's very important that they do something for banning the Taliban, because if they ban Taliban, they can keep this world in a peace. Otherwise, we will face with the Taliban attacks around the world, and they will continue fighting with America, with Russia, with Iran, with every country. Now they are very powerful. They have everything. They have everything. They are powerful. They have money. America sent them for about, I think, $2 million, and America want to reach them and want them to become powerful. But it's very bad for the world. It's very bad for the woman of the world. You know, when we are talking about the woman, it means not woman of Afghanistan, not woman of Iran. It means woman of the world. I'm a woman of Afghanistan, but when Iranian people, government, kill Mahsa Amini on the Iran, I was thinking that he was one of my body part, and my head was pain because of Mahsa Amini, because he was a woman, she was a woman. And in all over of the world, if something happened to anyone that she is a woman, it means it is a human, it is a woman, and she have the same right that other people have in the world. And I want to say you that we want to continue our struggle, we want to achieve our goals, but we need to make some plan. We need to improve our connection, our network connection with all over of the world. We are putting our lives in the danger and raising the voice for the women of Afghanistan. But some of the women from Afghanistan that they are still being out of the country, they try to do whiteness for the Taliban. It is very bad because they have a stage, they have their connection, they have the media. They can be useful for this movement, for the movements of women inside Afghanistan, but they don't do anything for them. Even when we get out of the prison of the Taliban, we were about 27 women and children, and other was men. But until now, I didn't receive, all of us didn't receive any call from that women that they were busy on the past 20 years as a minister, as a political person. And it means that it's a big problem. It's a big problem. We don't have anyone like Masih Ali-Najat out of the country to raise the voice of Afghanistan women, to do anything for Afghanistan women. That is the result that until now, we don't have any result of our movement. And Taliban didn't recognize by any country. It doesn't mean that the countries did not do it because of our people. They did not do it because of their country, their people. They don't want to put their people, their country on the situation of Afghanistan. But it doesn't mean that Taliban can control themselves, can remove their law against the woman. It doesn't mean that the Taliban will ban. We must to search another way. We must to talk with each other, with the women of the world, with those women that they were busy on fighting for their people, to find a good way, to achieve our goals, to free our country, because we can't believe that it is about 18 or 19 months that all the people of Afghanistan are in the jail. They couldn't raise their voices, they couldn't show their face, they couldn't talk in media, they couldn't do anything by their choices. You know, every people in Afghanistan lost their hopes, and all the people trying to have a visa passport to get out of the country. It is the big wish of our people, but we must change this situation. We must continue our struggle. I'm really in a bad situation. Miss Mitra know everything about myself. In last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, my father was arrested on Kapisa province, and I was not able to continue my fighting. I was I deactivated all my accounts in social media, and I said to my friends that I'm sorry, I couldn't do anything because my family will be on danger. But after 1 or 2 weeks, I start again, because I choose this way, and it is my power, it is my voice. I want to keep it, I want to continue, and I want to fight because of my daughter, because of my sister, because of my mother, because of all the women of Afghanistan. Indeed, I want to fight for the wife of Taliban, for the daughter of the Taliban, for the sister of the Taliban, because they are women, they are human. They must have the same right that I want, that I wish, that you have in another country out of the Afghanistan. We must fight for this. We must fight for our wish and achieve. We must achieve it. How we can be relaxed when my sister is crying for her school? How I can be relaxed when my daughter, my mother is crying for losing job because my father is jobless, my brother is jobless, my sisters are jobless, and some of our family members get out of the country, and this is very a big pain. How I can be relaxed with this pain? So we must to fight, we must to achieve our goals, and we must to don't let the world that forget about Afghanistan, and they must recognize this movement from the women of Afghanistan, and they must help the women of Afghanistan, because it is not about just one country that named Afghanistan. It is for about all over the world, and the world is responsible, because now we had this experience, and it is not because of ourselves, not because of our people. It is because of the but how I can say you, it's because of can I continue in Farsi? این به خاطر از است که دنیا یک سیاست ناتکمیل یا بی نتیجه بگوییم یا ناکام بگوییم در این منطقه داشت. مردم افغانستان بدون از اینکه فکر کنن که بعد از رفتن ما یا بعد از آمدن طالبان چه اتفاقی میفته، اینا دست یک وضعیت بد قرار دادن، دست یک وضعیت رها کردن. میفهمین؟ صحبت کردن در مورد وضع مردم افغانستان خیلی راحت است. ما شما شاید در این کنفرانس ها در هر ایونت دیگه بتونیم صحبت بکنیم، ولی زن افغانستان بودن خیلی سخت است. زن افغانستان بودن خیلی درد داره و این هیچ کسی بجز از ماهایی که تجربهش داشتیم نمیفهمه. ما یک زمانی ما تو تایم داریم یا ندارم؟ اگه تایم ندارم
وقت شما تقریبا تمام هست، ولی ما گفتم که آخرین جملات چون بسیار مهم است میام باید با انگلیسی ترجمه شد.
ما یک زمانی ما طالبان از پرده تلویزیون میدیدم و براستی براتون میگم که من میلرزیدم. من شاید که خرد بودم، نوجوان بودم. ویدیوی سربریدن اجمل نقشبندی را اونا در رسانه ها شریک ساختن و او را من دیدم و من تا زمانی که بزرگ شده بودم و دانشگاه میرفتم و وظیفه میرفتم و مادر شده بودم و برای خودم یک زندگی ساخته بودم، ما اونمو فیلم همیشه در می من حک شده بود. پدر من در ولایت های دوردست ایفای وظیفه کرد در 20 سال قبل به خاطر آینده ما و ما یعنی فکر کنین در ماها به پدر خود نمیدیدم. 6 ماه بعد پدر من به خانه می اومد به خاطری که ما آینده داشتیم، برای آینده خود ما می جنگیدیم، می رسمیدیم. ما به خاطر اینمی از بین بردن طالب ما واقعا میخواستم بجنگم. من خود قوی ساخته بودم، من مکتب رفته بودم، پدر من کار میکرد، خواهر من کار میکرد که ما طالب دیگه نخواهیم، ذهن طالبانی از کشور ما تمام شود. ولی در یک شبانه روز وقتی که تو بیدار میشی و تو میبینی که از پشت در تو حتی طالب میگذره و طالب در مکتب تبسته میکنه، طالب در دانشگاه تبسته میکنه، در وظیفه تبسته میکنه و تو را در محله هم شلاق میزنه. پیش از اینکه من به مبارزه آغاز کنم من شلاق طالب خورده بودم و او باعث شد که من بتانم در مقابل از این استاد. ولی من واقعا براتون میگم که من در جایی رسیدم که من همون توانایی را، همون انرژی را من پیدا کردم که من استاد شوم، چرا که من نمیتونستم ما دخترم در وضعیت رها کنم. من هر روزی که باید راست
خانم کوهستانی که من میره دختر که بسیار گپا جالب است، اجازه شما باشه گفتم جمله تمام شد من میره ترجمه میکنم. Just to kind of give a contextual translation of what she said, it was actually very important and also like heart-touching. It's kind of contextually, she says, I got courage because I felt the Taliban whip. When they beat me, I found my courage in that. When we were growing up, I saw the videos of Taliban beheading people, and it kind of created like an enormous psychological trauma for me, and that convinced me and made me promise to myself that I shall never let these people come back. Me, my sister, my father, we all worked across the country, and we tried to make sure that everything we have to prevent that coming in. Somehow, one night, we woke up in the morning and then everything was changed. But that doesn't mean that we lost our courage. And the courage remained because I felt what it means to confront Taliban, to be beaten by Taliban. And then I also knew that what it means to look at my daughter who's growing up. And I knew that I shall never let my daughter to experience that. It's actually easier to talk about Afghan women. We can all talk. But what matters, what the most difficult part is to being an Afghan woman. And being an Afghan woman means a lot of intimidations, threats, whipping, beating, losing your rights, but also means courage and standing against this tyranny and standing against the threat and intimidation of the Taliban. امیدوارم که درست ترجمه کرده باشم خانم کوهستانی. If I just مفهوم عمومی گپ شما را گفتم. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you very much for everything. It touched my heart. I know that what you say is kind of a reflection of all of us, what we think, all women of Afghanistan and men of Afghanistan. Thank you for like standing not only just women's rights, but also for the women of the wives, sisters, mothers of the Taliban themselves, because they have also right. Thank you so much for everything. بسیار ممنون. جهان سپاس. قلب ما را به حساب تپش آورد سخنهای شما. و now by جوری شما we're going to go to our second panelist. خانم سنا کوهستانی, if you're ready, the mic is yours.
Greetings, everyone. Assalamu alaikum to our panelists, audience, and let me thank you for organizing this amazing conference, and thank you for having me. Thank you for talking about Afghan women who are already forgotten by the world. And today I have some paper with myself to manage my time. I'm Sana Kohistani, a deprived citizen, student, and a teacher. I want to start my speech with a short story about my life. 24 years ago, the day I was born, the Taliban were in power. On the very day my father had to immigrate and leave home. When I was 4 years old, I had no idea what is a father or who is. Because the day I opened my eyes to the world, he had already left home. The war. The war had caused my father to leave us and made me to be unfamiliar to the world of father. My mother went through gloomy days to feed us and to protect us. And today, my past and better story has been repeated for thousands of children of my land. Thousands of children sleep with empty stomachs and frozen bodies, waiting for their fathers to return home one day. But I wish the story of every child was precisely like mine. When the father went away, but he came back one day. But it's not so. For many children, when the father leaves home, he never returns. This is a repetition of a better history. What I experienced, and now other children are experiencing the same thing. All this is exactly the price that the children pay for an unfair war. 4 years later, when my father returned home, it was like a sunrise in my life. And this light and sunrise was just the beginning of a sunset for some children. Here I found my father, but on the other side of the country, a child lost his father. After all, I want to say that what does the war mean to a child except fatherlessness, hunger, and diversity? When my father returned home, we thought that the misfortunes had gone away, everything had improved, and the bad people had gone. But this was only one side of the coin. We never reached the peace we thought. In these 20 years, our stomach were full, but our mind were not at ease. There was no peace. I went to school, I became an excellent student, I entered the university, but I was not sure, even for a single day, when I leave home, if I will come back or not. When I was leaving for university in the mornings, I could see the worry and the sadness in my mother's eyes. She was worried about her daughter. Will she return home back, or the mother will be handed over the pieces of her body? Explosion, suicide, seeing humans, bodies, pieces, and these were become a daily part of our lives. When I lost my friends in Kabul University explosion, I realized that we were not living. We were just breathing while waiting for death. All these were the result of sunset in another city. This sunrise was not priceless for us. We paid for that. Many fathers were buried in both cities. Many children buried their dreams. Many mothers were in flood of tears. What did it matter to a child? Which side of the line of the war his father was fighting? He never wanted to lose him. Finally, after 20 years of misery and war, the peace talks were a great hope for all people of Afghanistan. All people welcomed and waited for a peaceful interaction and the establishment of a coalition government, of Republic government of Afghanistan with the Taliban. It was a vital opportunity for a prosperous and independent Afghanistan. But unfortunately, the former president of Afghanistan, Dr. Ashraf Ghani, destroyed and disregarded coming opportunity, and by running away and applying wrong policies, selfishness, once again, he plunged Afghanistan into a pit of misery, and he traded Afghanistan in a spoiled political game. Now this is the people of Afghanistan. Now this is us, the women of Afghanistan, who are paying the price. Today, we are awaiting an oppressive ruling with the approaches of 20 years ago. Nothing has changed. Women deprivation from their fundamental rights, persecution, assassinations, oppressive orders issued on women, economical crisis, the immigration crisis, forced immigration. These are all a part of our oppressive situation under the rule of the Taliban. And every day, there's a report of suicide, there's a report of violence and forced marriages of women and young girls in Afghanistan. The country is in an economical crisis, and almost about 26 million of people, which is more than half of population, need urgent humanitarian aid. Making women unemployed actually deteriorated the economical situation of families. The women ones who were supporting their families, who were feeding their families, now they are a part of these 26 million needy people. And this is really devastating. But one thing I want to mention, that despite these challenges, despite these tragedies, people still do not support the war. We have fought enough, and we have killed each other adequately. A backward, a ruined, and a dependent Afghanistan is the only result of war. I want the Taliban to take the advantages of this opportunity to build a prosperous, independent, and powerful Afghanistan, restore women's rights, stop issuing oppressive orders, and work towards the formation of an inclusive government with an approach free of prejudice and discrimination. If the Taliban do not change their approach and do not restore the women's rights in Afghanistan, it's basically a resistance against themselves. Sooner or later, a revolution will take place against oppression and deprivation, and even their loyal supporters will oppose them. If they think that it is not possible or it is unlikely, so they can watch the protesting women, how they are courageously, despite arresting, despite assassination and torture, they are still pouring in the streets and demanding and shouting their rights. This protesting population will become larger, and one day will destroy their oppressive ruling. And without a doubt, undoubtedly, the leader of this revolution will be a woman. I'm a deprived student. As you see me, as you see my appearance, and I'm like a present in my room. And today I become a teacher of deprived young girls. This is the only thing that I can do from this room. I teach young girls who are deprived from their higher education through segregated schools. The deprivation atmosphere makes me to accept the risk and teach young girls through segregated online schools. I know I may be one day be arrested, or maybe be killed, but this is nothing can stop me. And like me, there are millions of girls who are not going to give up, who are not going to stop. And at the peak of despair, the women of Afghanistan are the only hope for this country. Women's, when I want to talk about the protesting women, I feel something very different. I can't speak. It's very emotional for me. Actually, I was saying that women's spontaneous movement and demonstrations are the significant turning point in the history of Afghanistan. And we are a best, and they are a best model of our rich culture, awareness, and peaceful resistance and courage of country women. And let me get my paper. Finally, I just want to end my speech by leaving a short message for Afghan women and young girls, either in exile or in country as a prison like me. I just want to say them that you are the hope for Afghanistan. I can see a prosperous and free Afghanistan in the eyes of each of you. And never surrender for the better and tragic fate that has happened. Look for light, even in the darkness, however it may be tiny or small. Take every opportunities to empowerment, to empower yourself, to empower other women. Do not stop your peaceful resistance against deprivation, against oppressive orders. Julia, I think she's not present, and I just mentioned her name. That Julia Parsi is one of our brave protesting women. Julia goes to streets protesting for your rights. I teach you. And all I want from you is do not give up, do not abandon learning. I want you to learn even inside your hoops. This is a struggle, and we need knowledge. We need awareness and knowledgeable and literate women more than ever. It is the only knowledgeable and informed woman, literate woman, who can raise an informed, nurture an informed generation and move Afghanistan towards prosperity and freedom. Do not underestimate yourself, Afghan women. You are the leaders of Afghanistan women's revolution that will take place one day. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's hard not to be completely overwhelmed, not listening to you and your courage and what you're doing in teaching in this and working and living and being alive. It's an inspiration to all of us. And I don't know what else to say because it's overwhelming. But thank you, because you gave us the means to actually be hopeful, and more importantly, gave us the courage that we need. Thank you so much. And I'm, on behalf of all the things, I'm extremely grateful on behalf of my family, on behalf of many people. Thank you. And we're going to go to our last panelist for this panel, Monisa Mabores. If you are available, please, the floor is yours, please.
صدای مرا دارین؟
مشنم.
Hello to everyone, and thanks a lot from your kindness and from your attention to make this type of opportunities that women from Afghanistan attend in this type of conference and share their pain and their life situation with the people in this type of conference. Thanks a lot. I'm really grateful from you and appreciate from all your people that you conducted this program. من فهم انگلیسیم خوب نیست. برداشت میکنین چیزی یا ای که دری صحبت بکنم؟ اما قدر میتونم که صحبت بکنم به انگلیسی.
به هر کدامش که راحت هستین. اگه ضرورت بود من بخشایشو میتونم ترجمه میکنم. در هر حالتش که احساس بگین انگلیسی یا فارسی ما در خدمت هستم.
درست است. تشکر. Thanks a lot. As you are in the picture and all the world in the picture, Afghanistan selling by international community and especially by United States in a political deal. Afghanistan sold by America in a political deal to Taliban, and they encouraged Taliban and gave this chance to Taliban to take over Afghanistan and govern to Afghanistan and take power in Afghanistan. But unfortunately, in this very shameful political deal, Taliban took over all the power in Afghanistan, and they came to Kabul just through of killing the people and through of fighting. So that was very clear for the international community and for the people all the world. Taliban never changed. Taliban's or that Taliban, the 27 years they were in Afghanistan, and all people know the idea and the opinion of Taliban and the program of Taliban and the supporter of Taliban, what they want, who support the Taliban, they fight for benefit of which country. It is very clear for the people. But about it is clear, and also for the international community, they know the Taliban never have this ability to govern in Afghanistan and also to control Afghanistan. They be able to manage all the problem in Afghanistan. But because of wrong computation between superpower countries in the world and also in the region countries, and they want to support Ukraine, and also their computation with Russia and with China is very important than the people of Afghanistan, especially than the women in Afghanistan. Because of that, they want to prefer the Afghanistan and invite Taliban to come in Afghanistan, and because they want to leave Afghanistan, and they have this plan to include in the war in Ukraine. Because of that, Taliban came, but the plan and the policy of Taliban is very clear for all the world. They encourage and they support by some intelligence system of the region, and they took order or decree from that country and implemented their program in Afghanistan. So they targeted all ladies in Afghanistan, and after their coming to Afghanistan, they remove all the women from governmental organization and also from private sector. And also they send different, in about 1 year and 8 months, the leadership of Taliban sent 40 verdicts against the women to eliminate or limit the women, and also remove all the women from different parts of the society. After this this situation, just the international community, especially the UN, international organization in the world, just they are watching and also sending declaration and write some tweets to support the women, but exactly it is not real support, just by saying, by speech, nothing changed in Afghanistan, and the Taliban never changed. After the Taliban took over the Kabul, they came to Kabul at 15th of August, but all the women in Afghanistan, we were waiting to see what they will do in Afghanistan, because it is I never believed this, that Taliban, it means remove all the achievement and we will lose all the achievement that we reached during these 20 years in Afghanistan. We talk with all friends and in a WhatsApp group, and say in the governmental organization or ministries or governmentally offices will open. Some political changes came, and they will introduce acting cabinet, and after some days we will go, because it is impossible. Maybe the Taliban have experience from their last mistake, that they were in Afghanistan for 5 years because of their jealousy. The international community, especially United States, attacked and removed them in 2 weeks from all Afghanistan. Now they came with a very good experience, and they will change. And maybe after some days, the door of school and the door of governmental organization will open. We will take the part, because the ladies in Afghanistan participated in all development process in Afghanistan, and also take part in implementation of democracy values, and also they keep the values of humanitarians in Afghanistan. But after sometimes we discuss, we look at there is no changing in Taliban, and they have this plan to remove all the women. Because of that, we talked to each other, and the 4th of September, we conduct with lots of my friends in a protest in Kabul. On that protest, the Taliban came and also surrounded all the activists and beat one of the activists. Her name was Nargis. He was a soldier in the National Army. Her head broke, and also she got injured. After that, the Taliban told us, if you go to your home, we will release you. If you do not want to go and you want to continue your protest, we will take you to and put you to the jail. Because of that, we promised it on that day to Taliban in the street in front of the presidential office, please release us, we will go to our home. And they allowed all the activists, and all we went to our home. After that, I know we are in a very deep changes, but from negative changes. And it needs for a long time to struggle to stand against the Taliban, because there is a political deal, and maybe for a long time Taliban remove and never accept the women. And because of that, we started different, and all the activists established different protest movements, and also conducted different movements against all the plan, all the verdicts of the Taliban. And it is clear, and all the world know, just there is one force is struggling against the Taliban. They are the women of Afghanistan. They are the women in Afghanistan. But unfortunately, the people of Afghanistan didn't stand beside of us and support and take part in this protest, in this very national process that we shout and raise the voice of Afghan people. But the lady or the woman of Afghanistan could do this struggle, and also keep this voice loud in all the words, and struggle with the Taliban, and make clear this and prove this: the woman of Afghanistan is not that woman that 27 years the Taliban came and tortured them and beat them, and also close all the schools. And all the people have to refuse to immigrate to the other countries. But right now, lots of Afghan people, refugee in the different countries, they are immigrating also from Afghanistan. But there is a part of society, the women, they are struggling. And for example, right now, the Taliban sent the verdict or the decree to arrest Julia Parsi, Laila Basim, Zakia Zahadat, and also Musa Khatul. But yesterday also they went to the street and also raised their voice, and also send a clear message to the international community. Before I listen to the speech of Noira John, that was a very raised a very strong girls, a very strong activist in Afghanistan, and Taliban arrested him with her children and put it in the jail. But she never leave the line of protest. She never leave the line of fighting. Just change the country or the geography of the struggle, because it is difficult to one time if they arrested an activist, they will get guarantees, and also lots of people signed it by that person, and also they took a very strong commitment from that activist to not continue their activity in Afghanistan. Because of that, they have to change their place. And also me, also one of that activists that two times my home surrounded by Taliban intelligence and also the soldier of Taliban. I wasn't, no one was in my home, because I knew they will find my address and they will arrest me maybe after some days. And I leave my home. They force and torture and force the shopkeeper. His shop was in front of my home, and they send warning to him: if she came to her home, please coordinate with us, we will come. And in the government of Taliban, there is no regulation, and there is no law, and there is no principle. There is different type of Taliban in Afghanistan. Everybody has an imperator in Afghanistan, and he is like a president of Afghanistan. The National Security Department of Taliban or intelligence of the Taliban sent verdict to arrest me and send their soldiers to surround around my home. And also the Defense Ministry of Taliban send decree or order to the soldier: if you know Monisa Mubarak, you can directly shoot and you can directly kill her by gun, because she abused the leadership of the Taliban, especially Mullah Omar. When I attended a special interview in Tulu TV, they told me that the presenter of that program asked me why all the activists after sometimes leave the country, and this is for their protest is just for leaving the country, for making a documentary and also for making a case. I replied to this question of that journalist. I said, it is no problem. For the first time, defending from rights of Afghan people was the job and the main responsibility of the national army, the president of Afghanistan. But just now we are defending from the not only the rights of women, from rights of all the part of Afghanistan. And the second time, if you insist in this question too much, no problem. It is a historical matter for Afghan people. Sometimes the president of Afghanistan came from introduced by Russia. Sometimes the president of Afghanistan introduced by America. Sometimes by Pakistan. Where was Mullah Omar? Where is the grave of Mullah Omar? Who was Akhtar Mansour? Where he lives? Where he died? Show me the grave of Mullah Omar. Show me the grave of Akhtar Mansour. Where is Aibatullah? Who said the Aibatullah? Anyone see Aibatullah? Who is Aibatullah? Maybe that some retired general of Pakistan or some other intelligence system of the region order, and this is a position under the name of Mullah Aibatullah. Because of this answer, they sent the order of to soldier to kill me, and also directly shoot me, because I have to leave Afghanistan. I never forget that night at 10 o'clock of the night. Me, my father, and my mother was sit in the car, and also I exit from Kabul and go to Kandahar. From Kandahar, we went to the Herat. For 3 months, I was hiding. I had a hiding life in Iraq. After that, because I couldn't exit from border. After that, there's a foundation. After some news shared by media, the Taliban will kill Munisa Mubarak or arrested Munisa Mubarak. After that, some foundation sent message to me, you should exit from your country because it is not good for you. You're really under the very very tight risk. Because of that, I live Afghanistan.
Thank you so much. وقتان تقریبا تمام است. برای کدام جملات آخر دارید بفرمایید.
Just I want to say that in this 8th of March, it is the second 8th of March that Afghan leaders live under the government of the Taliban and under the control of a very jealous group and terroristic group in Afghanistan. Throughout all protest movement through coalition of women movements. We share with the international community some wishes and also some desire to do not recognize the Taliban because the leader of the Afghanistan never recognized the Taliban. There is no difference between good Talib and bad Talib. Talib is a terrorist. And the third, please don't ignore the policy of elimination or torture of Taliban. Please stop or ban the trip of the travel of Taliban because all the leaders in Afghanistan in the jail. They have life in the jail. And also do not come to Afghanistan, especially how you tourists, because it doesn't get any result. And also please prove your honesty by your action, not by your announcement and declaration. And also do not let the time with Taliban and close the door of Doha office and also close all the discussion or negotiation with Taliban and stop all the political discussion with the Taliban. That was 8 requests from the international community. In the 8th of March, we conducted a big protest in Islamabad in Pakistan, and also all the other movement and also conducted protests in Afghanistan with a clear message. And also we sent this letter to international community throughout the media and share our opinion, our belief, our wish, our desire to international community. But it's depend the international community because they are behave with Afghan people. Their action against Afghan people is political action, not humanity action. In political action, the international community calculate and count their benefit and their position and their computation in the region and in the international level. Because of that, they do not pay any serious attention to the Afghan leaders' situation. If they think they should implement it and consider and respect the human rights values, the democracy, it is a long time. It is 1 hour, 1 year, and also 8 months past from coming of Taliban in Afghanistan. But never the international community take any serious action against the Taliban because they think politically, not as a human. If the international community respect to the humanity of Afghan people, they shouldn't be wait. They shouldn't advise to Taliban. Oh, please don't this. It is very bad. It is a shocking news for us that Taliban closed the door of school for Afghan ladies, for Afghan girls. Oh, it is which type of humanity action? Just it is a political action. They want to make busy the people of Afghanistan, and also they want to make busy the opinion of all the world with this Taliban and also action of the Taliban. the media, and they want to progress and or improve their computation at the international level. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. What a powerful, moving, and also emotional panel, and a panel that talked about the truth. I wish we had more time to continue this discussion, but actually at the end of this panel, I thank you all the panelists and I salute your courage. I'm personally, and on behalf of my family and a lot of people that I know, we're all grateful for everything you're doing. Thank you. Thank God you're okay and safe. I remembered when they were after you. Thank you so much. Liladher, I think we are now giving the time. I think we can go straight to the panel number 3. So if you're ready, please go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
Dr. Sharifi, thank you, Munisa Khanum, for coming at the last minute and speaking to us. All these presentations have started a storm of not only the emotions, but of ideas in my mind. Having said that, we are now at the 3rd panel, which is about the future directions. And as we know, looking at future is like looking at the tea leaves. It's difficult to predict. But our participants today at this panel are Mitra Mehran and Gaisu Yari. Let me start introducing Mitra. Mitra Mehran is a young social entrepreneur and human rights activist from Afghanistan. She is the 2021 finalist for the European Parliament's Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought. She is a non-resident fellow with NYU's Center for Global Affairs. Until July 2022, she worked as a scholarship program director with USAID, Women's Scholarship Endowment Program, US Endowment Program, which provides scholarship for women to pursue their education in STEM majors. She has managed various projects and programs for nonprofits that primarily focused on women empowerment, human rights, justice, media, and political accountability, the same areas she wants to promote. She co-founded the Feminine Perspectives Movement ahead of intra-Afghan peace negotiations. The aim was to provide a platform for women across Afghanistan to raise their voices, to protect their fundamental rights, and to ensure women's perspectives that are reflected in peace negotiations processes. As a fellow within the National Center for Dialogue and Peace, she focused on encouraging intergenerational exchange and uniting different points of view, urban and rural, young and old, for sustainable peace. A leading voice in education and women empowerment, she writes opinion pieces for local and international outlets and delivers speeches. Her op-eds have been published in the international outlets such as Foreign Policy and The Diplomat. She has addressed United Nations headquarters in New York, European Parliament, or at Oxford University, Rice University, and many other venues. Our next speaker is Gaisu Yari, after Mitra. She is the project director of Afghan Voices. Gaisu Yari is a former commissioner in the civil services of Afghanistan and a human rights defender who holds a master's degree in human rights from Columbia University and bachelor's degree in Middle Eastern and gender studies from the University of Virginia. Gaisu is the director of Afghan Voices of Hope Project and travels around the world to collect the emotional narratives of fellow Afghan exiles. She is also an advocate and public speaker on gender justice. As an activist, she speaks at conferences, to individual organizations, and in the media on the rights of women in Afghanistan. So Mitra, if you don't mind, the floor is yours, and I will now.
Thank you, Dr. Dipali, Dr. Sharifi, Dr. Leader for convening this important conference today, and thank you so much for having me in the very long and kind introduction. This year, on the International Women's Day, I want to honor women, mainly women protesters of Afghanistan, who kept hope alive in us and then pushed all of us to fight for what is right. And then I think they not only kept hope alive in Afghanistan, but for Afghanistan around the world. And I want to start by honoring, naming the woman who I had the privilege to see them pushing us forward in the past 1 year, accepting a lot of challenges and problems and prosecution of Taliban in many different ways, including Munisa Jan and Noida Jan, that we have the honor of having them today. Tamanna Paryani, Parona Ibrahim Khail, Wahida Amiri, Nargis, who is now currently in the prison of Taliban, Fatima Zahra, Marjan, Madina, Farhat Mursal, Fariza, Shamail Zarifa, Julia, Huda, Humaira, Shukaiba, and many others who face Taliban's gunshot, but they still choose to go to street and demand freedom and justice. For the future directions, so I wanted to focus on three main things. First, shaping our narratives. Second, the political agency of women, and third, international legal mechanisms that we need to start talking about and taking at this point. First, on shaping our narratives, I think this is, after 1.5 years, it's the time that we move on from international only humanitarian aid and evacuation. Those things are very important, but I think there are already processes in institutions and organizations in place to do that. As women of Afghanistan, inside and outside Afghanistan, we need to mobilize our voices in relation to many issues, including, I know that the collapse happened in a way that we all didn't expect it, honestly. So the efforts have been very scattered. They have been there very powerfully, but we have been scattered. And I think the first and most important thing is how we change this important narrative that that the world stops seeing women as victims who are only asking for women's rights. And that comes with recognition of political agency of women on the ground, and making sure that when the world is talking about Afghanistan, they don't see only Taliban as people who have the power on the ground, and just in case of when it's only about women's rights, then they address women of Afghanistan. I think that there are many different groups of women movements. Noida Jan and Munisa Jan, who we have them today with us, are leading some of those movements, and there are many on the ground, even small. I think they need the legitimacy and the recognition from our side. And for that, there are two things I want to mention. The first thing is, we need this collaboration more in shaping our narrative, so we do not allow others to define for us things like or divide us in by saying women who are in diaspora or women who are in Afghanistan whose voice is more legitimate. I think at this time, every woman from Afghanistan, when she voices the problems, when she go there for justice and work, she needs to be heard and legitimized. And we need the solidarity and coordination and cooperation among us more, because I think, and now that was true before too. During the negotiations, they were saying that urban and rural women, and I think those narratives are created by certain stakeholders to weaken our voices. And we as women of Afghanistan need more discussions, more trust building among ourselves, to not let other people to talk for us, do not let certain stakeholders to weaken us by saying that certain woman is a politician, that certain woman is an NGO woman, that certain woman come from certain family, and divide us and weaken us. One thing that we need at this point for our strength is unity and solidarity between us, and I see that exists among women. I see how much women in diaspora or in exile are supporting women in Afghanistan, and how much women in Afghanistan voice their problems and see and talk to each other. We all know each other, we are in contact, but I think when they go on social media or put this narrative out there to divide women more and weaken women more, so we should avoid that. That's the most important thing in terms of trust building among us. And the second and most important thing related to that, I think I mentioned, is recognition of political agency of women at international level as much as locally. Because when, for example, some more powerful people who consider themselves politicians travel to Afghanistan or talk about Afghanistan or political structure of Afghanistan, they never include or mention women as they should. And I think that is very important that we claim that political legitimacy, even if it's not recognized by some people, and it's our work. It needs systematic and organized work that we need to do, lobbying and advocacy for that to gain it. Because I think the women's movement in Afghanistan, that many of them are there, or women protesters, are the right people who deserve this political agency, and we need to work for that recognition. And then the other most important thing is pushing for international legal mechanisms to keep Taliban accountable. The things Taliban are doing against women in Afghanistan, ban on education, ban on employment, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, every single right that we as human beings are entitled to are stripped of women in Afghanistan. And that there are sexual persecution is recognized in customary law as crime, but CEDAW and other international human rights laws that we have, they condemn these things, but they do not criminalize it. So different countries around the world sending millions of dollars. It was $40 million before, but now it has increased to $80 million on weekly basis to through humanitarian aid in UN to Afghanistan. Even they say it is distributed through UN or it's life-saving effort, but the humanitarian aid is not in a principled way first. The second thing is it is indirectly doing the job of Taliban to provide services for the people while they are collecting money through taxation and other efforts. And that is important. And at the same time, when women are not allowed to work in NGOs, when women's freedom of movement is limited, when female aid workers are not allowed to work, women's access to humanitarian aid is not only restricted, but cut at this time. And millions of widows, a lot of women who are a majority of, I think it's 60 to 80% of internally displaced or women, are not having access to humanitarian aid. And that is where we need to push for international legal mechanisms to keep Taliban accountable. And I think that is missing at this point. So countries do not know kind of what to do, or politically they are cautious, but if there are some legal measurements or conventions there to keep them accountable, then they have to obey it. So one thing that I think a lot of feminists and international lawyers have suggested, and I push for it too, is recognition of gender apartheid in Afghanistan. Because every inhuman act defined in Article 2 of the Convention on Prevention of Apartheid is currently being committed by the Taliban against women of Afghanistan. And I need to highlight this too, that certain inhuman acts are being applied in Afghanistan way worse than what used to happen in South Africa. For example, there were some limitations in right to education. There was certain classes that people in South Africa couldn't attend, or there are certain majors, or there were certain areas they cannot work. So there were limitations in those rights in South Africa. But then in Afghanistan, all those rights are banned through different decrees. There are around 42 or over 42 decrees that are issued by Taliban against women that limit every single right. So I think that this is the right time for us, and the action we need to take at this point for the future and push for it is keep Taliban accountable through international law. In that way, we, as women of Afghanistan, we do not only push countries to keep Taliban accountable, but we also make international community and state members in the UN responsible against what's happening in Afghanistan. So I think, and then also I need to make sure to mention this, what's happening in Afghanistan, because I have been attending CSW in the past week and talking with UN personnel who are here from Afghanistan or who are working in Afghanistan portfolio, saying that what's happening in Afghanistan is unprecedented, especially in terms of women not having access to humanitarian aid. And so they don't have any policy or program or even from past to know what to do. They do not know what to do about it too. So it's our job to work with international organizations to, as much as we are working with ourselves in doing advocacy, to see the existing legal frameworks and navigate through them to keep authorities responsible. And then I think another important actor is OIC, Organization of Islamic Countries, who are not doing enough about Afghanistan. I went to one of their sessions in General Assembly yesterday, and the bad thing was it was Women in Islam, the name of the conference, and I think in CSW in New York. First, there was no woman or no representative from Afghanistan in that conference. And we know the worst women's rights crisis is happening in Afghanistan, and Taliban are connecting it with Islam. But then in OIC event, do we have one female commissioner from Afghanistan, Asila Jani Wardak, there? But she was not invited. We didn't have any representative from Afghanistan. And the bad thing was I got frustrated and left at the middle of the meeting, but some other friends remained and had some interventions, except UK and I think 2 other countries. None of other Islamic countries even mentioned issue of Afghanistan. I think till I was there, only Foreign Minister of UK mentioned it. So I think our job is very hard, but we know the institutions that are there, we know the laws. It's our job to collaborate more and push people, both inside and outside Afghanistan, and push institutions and laws that exist to serve us as members of the United Nations, to keep them accountable. That's the first thing, internationally. And then nationally, I think we need to start shaping our narratives. That is important, both for strengthening ourselves as women, and then also push for the world and everyone to recognize political agency of women's movements in Afghanistan who are courageously and bravely have stood against Taliban on the streets of Kabul in the past 1.5 years. And I think that is very important that we push for that, because world sees that the Taliban is the only power holders in Afghanistan, and there is no strong resistance. Even if the military resistance is there, recognition of them are very important. I personally recognize them, and the world should, but also I think the most strong civic movement and resistance against the Taliban are women of Afghanistan, and they deserve to be recognized for that. So it's our job. It's hard, but we have a lot to do both at national and international level. And I'm so proud of, honestly, the solidarity among women and the connection and the strength I see among women in Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan, and women like Naira Jan and Munisa Jan and others I named have given me hope and strength to keep moving in the past 1 year. And last and most important thing is we are in awe of their bravery, and there is not much being done about them. The women who are living in limbo in third countries, hopefully the American audience hearing me push their Congress members to prioritize their evacuation so they can seek asylum in refuge in a safe country, because I think now the military is responsible for the evacuation and they are prioritizing them, not the civil society. And then some women who have been imprisoned and tortured have already spent a year and a half in Pakistan, and they deserve the attention they should. It's our job. So if you are an American, if you hear me, make sure you write to your Congress, men or women, to do their job. Thank you so much for today, and I am honored to be here.
I assume the floor is yours now. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mitra.
Wow. Okay, can I start? Sorry, I didn't hear you well.
Yes, please. Yes,
Okay.
of course. Thank you.
All right, I guess the last speaker is probably the most challenging one, because I don't know what else is left to say, right? What else is left to say about brave women from Afghanistan, or what else is left to say about brave women who are in diaspora or in exile, fighting shoulder to shoulder with women inside the country. I woke up yesterday morning receiving a message of my mother's photo, who participated in a women's gathering in Poland, in the Afghanistan's embassy there, which is a little bit cliche to have these kind of, gatherings, but for my mom, it was a different experience. And she never was a leader, and she never got a higher education, but she understood what woman leadership means in her community, and what it means to lead, to support her children, especially her husband, who got killed by the Taliban in 2000. I honor her, and I honor everybody today. I would like to start by not taking a very long time to explaining what I have been doing since the collapse of Afghanistan. I am collecting stories. I'm collecting narratives. I'm collecting emotional narratives of those who are in exiles. Yes, we are definitely need to focus in Afghanistan, but at the same time, I think it's important to focus on those who are also in exile. I'm not sure how I feel being in this country. I don't know how other women's rights defenders are feeling in these countries. Are we equipped? Do we have enough resources to stay shoulder to shoulder with women inside the country? I think 18 months later, for me, it would be important to reflect what have we done in 18 months? What are our responsibilities going forward? What are those personal narratives mean? I remember going to Florida and seeing a woman lawyer in a camp, in a hotel, interviewing her. I asked her what she wanted to bring with her, but she couldn't from Afghanistan. She basically told me that what she got, she brought her education, she brought her diplomas, she brought her experiences from Afghanistan. Those matter in the United States? They don't to her, right? And I asked another question from another activist who was in France, for instance. I asked, what would you like, if 30 years passes, what would you like to tell your daughter? What would you like to tell the next generation in Afghanistan about you, about being in exile? He looked around and told me that, well, I would be ready to be called back to return to Afghanistan. I think everyone who are in exile are really, they are in exile. I don't think it needs other explanations at all, but it's really important to recognize that they are struggling too. They are going to different paths. But however, what happens right now is that, as I was thinking in the past 2 days about the donors' approaches on supporting women inside Afghanistan, and also giving a lot of fellowships, scholarships, and opportunities to women who are in exiles, are also coming with a lot of expectations. One, it is that they are expecting us, for instance, to fill, I think, their organization's gaps in terms of giving them, solutions, strategies, building their strategies with them. For instance, I don't want to name it, but we have a lot of organizations these days trying to do a lot of consultations with women in Afghanistan and the region, and also in diasporas such as the United States and UK, and also I think some in Canada, focusing a lot on doing consultations to shape their strategies, working and supporting women inside Afghanistan and also outside. But I think that is a lot of pressure. I think everybody is just pressured so much from the donor's perspective to shape their strategies so that they can spend their money. But I don't think for us, it is about how much money you're going to spend on women's rights and you're going to check the box at the end of the day. But I think the better mechanism would be to have a coordination mechanism among donors supporting women in the country and outside, and policies that are collectively supporting each other, but not being against each other. You are seeing a lot of, donors such as USAID counterparts, international organizations, which is called INGOs around the world, are now trying to incorporate a lot of voices from inside Afghanistan and those who are in exiles, because they would like to check the box, basically telling their leaders that they actually talk to women and this is what women want. Maybe they're not, women who are giving them consultations are not in their best positions to give solutions. I personally don't know what kind of solutions I would be able to give. Do I look really depressed? I probably am, right? Am I really whining all the time, complaining all the time? Maybe I do, but I think it's really important for us 18 months later to just focus about us reflecting what we really need to do strategically. And I agree with Mitra on changing the narrative. I think in the past 18 months, the whole world's narrative shaping is reaction to what the Taliban are, announcing. We are not leading the narratives, right? They are the one who are leading the narratives. And that is our responsibility, that we need to focus strategically. What is our comms strategy? How are we going to, battle in the internet and to win, right? If we cannot get a gun to go in the country, but we have other tools to use it. I think the next aspect of solidarity and unity, I also agree with Mitra that that is unfortunately missing, because everyone in other countries are really busy with their personal lives, trying to resettle, going through traumas, not sure if they have the opportunity to contribute as much as they should. And personally, me, I haven't talked for the whole 18 months as much, because I didn't know how to approach it. I didn't know how to suggest something. I'm not in Afghanistan, and it will be extremely hard to tell donors what to do inside the country. I think I would like to emphasize that I agree with Mitra on changing the narratives, working on different fronts. But I also would like to emphasize that women rights activists who are in exiles are not probably in their best positions. The expectations that the donors in these countries are having at different conferences are not helping them, are not helping these women to strengthen their approach, their fight, both inside and Afghanistan, both in media, as well as, in the different countries that they're living. I hope it did make sense. I hope, I think I didn't know what else I could say, I mean, there were so many good conversations going on here, and I really was honored to listen to all of those. And I hope these kind of recommendations to look at, changing the narrative, as I agree with Mitra, focusing on women and diasporas, and also looking at donors and the way they are shaping their narratives should be a priority going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gaisu, for your thought-provoking conversation with the audiences, right? It seems like a monologue, but I find it that monologue is sometimes internal dialogue, and we all can learn from it. And Mitra, thank you for speaking about what happened at that conference yesterday and how you felt about it. It is very important to note that feelings matter. They are not performative. They are genuine. People who are in Afghanistan, I heard their stories and I was like, I don't know. I'm sitting in the security of this country in a white tower of academia. I don't deal with these issues, but people are really out there doing their stuff, trying to raise these issues. So I'm very grateful. Unfortunately, because of some personal circumstances, our last speaker, who was going to provide us with concluding remarks, could not join us today. I apologize that Dr. Yurish is not here. So I have been told that whether we can wrap up this conference now. But before we wrap up, I would like the audience to consider participating and joining American Institute of Afghanistan Studies. And I'm inviting the field director, Dr. Omar Sharifi, to provide some concluding remarks for this conference. Thank you all for attending, and thank you our speakers. I'm خیلی ممنون هستم، خیلی سپاسگزارم چرا چون شما حرف زدید و صحبت کردید. So I'm very grateful to all of you. Thank you so much. Dr. Sharifi, please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I mean, I was thinking about that what am I supposed to say as a man as a concluding remark on a conference that's on women? And initially I thought about it, but then, but all I can say that we have covered different aspects of life and the struggle, and then struggle against gender apartheid, against tyranny, and the resistance of the Afghan woman that actually makes Afghanistan still alive, despite the darkness, despite the silence. And more importantly, gave all of us, especially the men of Afghanistan, who miserably failed in their endeavor to bring liberty in this country, to the country. You're an inspiration for all of us. Your stance, your work, whether in diaspora, whether inside Afghanistan, is something that actually means that Afghanistan is not dying, and the silence is temporary, and we can move forward still. And if there is any hope for Afghanistan in the 21st century, that a country that appreciates liberty and understands human rights and stands for human rights, I think that is because of what you're doing right now. You bring meaning to what for a long time was seen as something just slogans. You bring meaning to the whole idea of human rights and human rights struggle and women's rights struggle in Afghanistan. I don't want to say anything else. I just want to thank you all on behalf of Mike Lilatar, Dipali, and all the team who worked here to put this together. Thank you again, and God bless you. بسیار زیاد ممنون. خداوند همراهتان باشه. لطف کردین و واقعا جای افتخار هست که شما هستین امروز. تا که از خاطر شما افغانستان باقی میمونه. تشکر.
Thank you so much. We'll be ending now this conference, and have a beautiful afternoon, night, and stay safe. Thank you.
Stay safe. خدا حافظ.
خدا حافظ.